Hi guys, Peter here, and I just wanted to share a really quick video on something that I've been noticing with some of the branding projects that we're working on. So I've been spending some more time looking at how we actually roll out design and bringing some of our projects to life. So obviously I'm working on the strategy part of projects up front, but also all the way through into seeing them come to life. And traditionally we used to create these big brand guidelines documents, so very official, very formal, have all of the logo, clear space, color palettes, fonts, all of those sorts of things, all of the tools that you need to bring a brand to life. But the deliverable from the brand creation would be handing over the guidelines document. It's kind of, that's the way it's always been, and it's kind of still the way that a lot of the industry practices. But because we do a lot of innovation, because I've been spending a lot of time in the startup world, I've been thinking a lot about whether or not there's a better way to bring these brands to life and actually transition between the creation of a new logo, the creation of a new brand, and actually having it be implemented and come to life. Because it's always a slight kind of handover or a slight friction point, which is, it's kind of always been interesting to me. Because if you're going to go to all the effort to create something, you kind of want to see it through. So one of the things that I've experimented with a little bit with the Innovation Warehouse project that I worked on with a team in London, where we actually rebranded a co-working space and an angel investment fund. And what we did is we created a live online brand guidelines. So it lives at innovationwarehouse.org/brand, and it can be used by the team when they need to get a high-res copy of the logo or an image. It can be used by the community who are members when they actually need a copy of the logo for something that they're doing in terms of promoting it, or people that are organizing events. And it also acts as a bit of a signature piece because people can tell that the Innovation Warehouse team take the brand seriously and are doing things properly. So it's one of the things, and when I was researching that, I really make a huge recommendation that you consider, if you're creating a new brand, making your brand guidelines online. So that's kind of using a digital asset management tool, or using an official kind of online brand guidelines tool, or even just kind of putting it on your website somewhere. It definitely needs to be online these days, partially because some of the actual brand itself will be online, so style guides, fonts need to be web fonts, those sorts of things. So it's good for it to exist online because it's a good test. I'd also try and make it live so that it can be updated, people can comment on it, that you are adding new images periodically, because that's what keeps it fresh. If it just sits there static, then it will tend to age and get a little bit old and maybe get out of date. So MailChimp, for example, do an amazing job of having online brand guidelines that they're constantly updating with different campaigns, different things that they're doing. And that way, whenever you look at it, it feels like it's kind of current and it's up to date. And the third thing I do is consider making it public. So there's a really interesting trend for companies like MailChimp, Slack does this as well. A lot of modern kind of tech companies will make their logo guidelines, their brand guidelines public, because and there used to be a fear about this, what if someone takes my logo and misuses it and things. But the chances are the sorts of people that want to see your brand guidelines are either interested in the brand or are somehow going to be using it anyway. So it might be, we found it's people like the press and journalists that need a copy of the logo or a copy of kind of some high-res images of your brand so that they can use them in an article. It's people that are doing design work for you on behalf, but maybe not necessarily core to the team. The sorts of people that need access aren't always going to have the password, the login, know who to ask in the marketing team, not even be internally within the business. So by making it public, you make it very, very easy for people to find. So I would suggest you make your brand guidelines live, you make them online, and you make them public. But the real change in the industry, and this is the thing that I'm really, really excited about, is actually beyond just the brand guidelines and making them good, is actually that the brand comes to life through pieces of collateral, through the things that you do. So traditionally we would create in the branding world what we call kind of concept applications, but they were, and this is a very nuanced point, they were deliberately not something that you could actually implement, or they weren't intended to be implemented. So they were example only or kind of concept only applications. And I think that was good because it gave the design team some freedom. So you could just create stuff, you didn't need to worry about getting it signed off or approved or going through massive rounds of iterations with the client. You were just like, we've created a brand for you, and if you were to apply it in business cards, this is what it might look like. But I think the profession of branding and the practice of creating brands is changing, and that in today's day and age, companies need to have something real. It needs to come to life very quickly. So I would actually recommend, and we're doing this now with some of our clients, is actually coming up with real world applications and then actually just taking them through and implementing them very, very quickly. So it's almost as soon as you're creating the brand, it's that lean startup approach where you very quickly move on to actually what can we do to bring this thing to life. So I think doing things in social media is really interesting. So if you can come up with an experiment where you can actually implement the brand with a piece of content. So I quite like educational pieces of content for this, because you're not trying to rebrand the whole company. You may already have an existing brand and you're transitioning to a new brand. But if you can just create a couple of signature pieces of content that allow the new brand to to breathe and that you can apply them to something, then you can kind of see those out there and people will notice them. Now, if you've got a giant brand like Coca-Cola or Yahoo or BP and you're doing a rebranding, then there might be an argument that you just try and change over everything at once and do it overnight, shock and awe style rebranding. But I'd say even in those big companies, actually doing some pilot projects and experimenting and iterating is a really powerful way of softly rolling out the new brand. It's really worthwhile to try and find some pieces of collateral, some things that you can apply the brand to that allow you to test it out in the real world with real users, because you may well learn something and want to iterate it and change it. I think we're moving to see things more online, more live, and more iterative,